Marcus Ellison was 40 years old, and the most expensive thing his wife had ever seen him drive was a 7-year-old Ford F-250 with a dent in the rear quarter panel he hadn't bothered to fix. She thought she knew the shape of him completely. A structural engineer who came home smelling like concrete and kept his work boots on the porch. A man who packed his own lunch, drove a truck with 94,000 miles on it, and fell asleep before 10 on weeknights. That was the version of Marcus his wife Renee had decided she married. So when she told him she was flying to Scottsdale for a long weekend with the girls from her spin class, she kissed him on the cheek without meeting his eyes, and she rolled her carry-on out the front door of the house he had built with his own hands. She had no idea that he had already found the hotel confirmation, a private villa, Sleeps 2, billed to an account she had been hiding for nearly 2 years. She had no idea that in 48 hours, Marcus Ellison would step off his own aircraft onto a Scottsdale tarmac with a manila envelope in his hand and a stillness in his chest that had taken him 30 years to build. She had no idea that the quiet man she had spent 9 years underestimating was already 3 steps ahead. And what was waiting for her at that villa would not be forgettable. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm was set for 5:15, but Marcus never needed it. His eyes opened on their own at 5:03, the way they did every morning, calibrated to something older than the clock. He lay still for a moment in the dark of the bedroom, the ceiling fan turning slow overhead, the October air carrying the first real edge of cool through the window screen he always left cracked. Charlotte was quiet at this hour. The neighborhood they lived in, a modest subdivision off Steel Creek Road, the kind of place where people kept their gutters clean and waved from driveways, didn't stir until after 7. Marcus liked it that way. He liked the hour before the world got loud. He dressed in the dark. Work clothes laid out the night before. Canvas pants, a worn gray shirt, steel toe boots he unlaced and relaced every morning out of habit. He went downstairs and made coffee the same way he made everything, with precision and without ceremony. His mother had told him once that the way a man does the small things is the same way he does the large ones. He thought about that most mornings. He'd been thinking about it more than usual lately. He stood at the kitchen counter and looked out the window at the backyard while the coffee brewed. 6 years ago, that backyard had been a slope of red clay and weeds. He'd graded it himself over 3 weekends, poured the footings for the back deck with a rented mixer, framed it in pressure-treated lumber, and laid composite decking in a herringbone pattern that still lay perfectly level. He knew because he checked it every spring with a 4-foot level. Not because he doubted his work. Because he respected what he'd built enough to verify it. Marcus Ellison had been a structural engineer for 15 years. He worked for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte called Carver Group, known in the Carolinas for bridge rehabilitation and commercial foundation work. He was not a flashy engineer. He was the kind the younger ones called when a calculation didn't sit right, when a soil report came back with a number that didn't match the geology, when someone needed to look at a thing honestly and say what it was. He had a reputation for being slow to speak and almost never wrong. Renee came downstairs at 7, moving through the kitchen in her workout clothes, hair in a tight bun, already on her phone. She was a licensed esthetician who ran her own small studio downtown, had built it into something real over the past 4 years, and she carried herself with the particular pride of someone who had done that. Marcus had always liked that about her. He'd liked a lot of things about her. She poured coffee without looking up from her screen. "Your overnight bag is on the porch," Marcus said. "I moved it so I wouldn't trip on it." She looked up, distracted. "Thanks, flight's at noon. I'll probably just head straight from the studio." She scrolled something. Can you put the trash out Thursday? I'll handle it. She nodded, already moving back toward the stairs. At the bottom step, she paused. I'll call you when I land. He watched her go. He turned back to his coffee. He held the mug with both hands and felt the warmth of it, and let himself sit with what he knew, which was not everything yet, but was enough. It had started 11 days ago. Not with a feeling, not with intuition. Marcus didn't put much stock in intuition. It had started with a number. He did the household accounting on the first Sunday of every month. Nothing elaborate, just a spreadsheet he'd maintained since they combined finances after the wedding, tracking income, fixed expenses, savings contributions, and discretionary. He was methodical about it the way he was methodical about everything. He'd pulled up October's summary and noticed a line item he couldn't account for. A recurring transfer, $420, outbound into an account number he didn't recognize. He'd looked at it for a long time. Then he'd looked at September. Same transfer, different date. August, July, he scrolled back 14 months before he stopped. He didn't call her name. He didn't pull up her text history or go through her phone. He closed the laptop, washed his coffee mug, dried it, and put it back on the shelf. Then he went into the garage, turned on the shop light over his workbench, and stood there for 40 minutes with his hands braced on the edge of the bench, looking at nothing in particular, letting the weight of it settle in. His father had been a carpenter. He used to say that bad news was like a warped joist. Ignoring it didn't make it straight. You had to get it down on the floor, look at it under real light, and decide whether it could be salvaged or had to come out entirely. Marcus had learned early not to flinch from real light. He started digging that same night. Quietly, carefully, beginning with what he had access to. In the 3rd year of their marriage, he and Renee had set up a shared document folder for household files, insurance policies, warranty records, tax documents, appliance manuals. Marcus accessed it maybe twice a year. Renee used it more often for receipts she wanted to track for the studio's bookkeeper. He hadn't looked at her personal subfolders in years. He'd had no reason to. He wasn't that kind of husband. He opened the laptop and navigated to the shared drive. He almost closed it when he found the folder. It was labeled simply with the word travel, nested under a personal directory he'd never opened. He held the cursor over it for a moment. Then he clicked. There were 14 files. Most of them were flight confirmations, the kind she'd mentioned, a conference in Raleigh last spring, a girls' trip to Nashville 2 years back that he remembered clearly. He was reaching for the close button when he saw the file name at the bottom of the list. AZ_Villa_Conf_Final, PDF. He opened it. Desert Ridge Private Villa, Scottsdale, Arizona. Check-in this coming Friday. Check-out Monday. Guests: Renee Ellison and 1 guest. Villa amenities listed below: a private pool, a couple's massage package booked for Saturday morning, a dinner reservation at a restaurant called Ember and Stone for Friday evening, table for 2. He read the document 3 times. He gave it every reasonable interpretation he could construct. He sat with each one until it collapsed under its own weight. Then, he looked at the payment line. The account number matched the one from the transfers he'd found in the household spreadsheet. He sat back. His hands were flat on the desk. The shop clock on the wall behind him ticked. He picked up his phone and found the number for Trazio Say, the woman Renee had told him was organizing the Scottsdale trip. They'd met twice at a studio event. Tracy was a client, and something like a friend. Easy in conversation, the kind of person who remembered your name. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. Marcus, hey, this is a surprise. Her voice was warm, slightly puzzled. He kept his tone easy. Hey, Tracy, sorry to bother you. I was just trying to reach Renee and her phone's going straight to voicemail. She mentioned the Scottsdale trip, you all flying out together? A pause. Brief, but Marcus heard everything in it. Scottsdale, Tracci said. Marcus, I'm not going to Scottsdale. I don't think anyone from the studio is. Another pause. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I must have gotten the details crossed. Sorry to bother you, Tracci. Have a good evening. He ended the call. He set the phone down very precisely in the center of the desk. His hands didn't shake. He breathed in through his nose, counted 4 seconds, breathed out. He thought about the deck in the backyard, the one he'd leveled himself. He thought about his mother telling him the way a man does the small things is how he does the large ones. He thought about the transfers, 14 months of them. $420, steady and quiet, month after month, draining away into an account with someone else's name attached to it somewhere. This was not a conversation. That thought arrived in his chest clean and cold, like a calculation that had already been checked. He opened his contacts and scrolled to Denise Okafor. She'd been his parents' attorney before she became his. Sharp, careful, the kind of woman who didn't offer comfort but always told you the truth, which Marcus had decided long ago was worth more. It was 9:47 at night when he called. She answered. Denise, I need to talk to you. It's about a divorce filing. I need it moving before the end of the week. A breath. Then come in tomorrow at 8. He was there at 7:55. He told her what he had, the transfers, the villa confirmation, the phone call with Tracci. She listened without interrupting, which was how he knew she was taking it seriously. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then looked at him. We need a forensic accountant before we file, she said. If she's been moving money, I want the full picture in hand before she knows we're looking. And Marcus, we need to know who he is. He already had a name. He'd spent an hour the night before on Renee's social media, going back methodically, looking for patterns the way he looked for load irregularities in bridge data. A name appeared 3 times in 2 years, always casually, always at the edge of a group photo, always with the particular body language of someone trying not to look like they were paying attention to someone they were paying a great deal of attention to. Garrett Solis, Director of Business Development at a regional hospitality group that owns several hotel properties in the Southeast and Southwest. His LinkedIn photo showed a man in his mid-40s with easy posture and an expensive watch. The kind of man who had never had to wait for anything he wanted. Marcus showed Denise the screen. She looked at it for a moment and said simply, "Pull everything you can on the account movement. I'll call Terrence Adeyemi. He's the best forensic accountant I know. Morehouse man. He doesn't miss things." Terrence Adeyemi didn't miss things. He called Marcus back within an hour of getting Denise's referral, asked 3 questions, and said he could begin within 24 hours with read-only access to the joint accounts. His voice had the unhurried precision of a man who had spent 2 decades finding numbers people hoped would never be found. 4 days later, Marcus sat in Terrence's home office, a converted sunroom in a brick house in Dilworth, every surface organized in a system that only Terrence fully understood, and looked at what had been found. Terrence set the first printout on the desk between them. Transaction log, clean columns, 17 months of outbound transfers from the joint household savings. Not the 420 Marcus had found. That was only one thread. There are 3 separate outbound accounts, Terrence said, adjusting his reading glasses. The 420 monthly you flagged. 2 others he identified once he had access to the statement history, smaller, irregular, designed not to pattern. He tapped the summary line at the bottom of the page. Total moved out of jointly accessible accounts over 19 months, $47,360. Marcus looked at the number. The timing, he said. Terrence was already sliding a second sheet across, side by side. Transfer dates in one column. Hotel and travel charges from a credit card registered in Renee's name alone, one she'd opened 19 months ago, in the other. 31 of the transfers fall within a 10-day window of a hotel charge or travel expense, Terrence said. The villa in Scottsdale is the largest single charge. The rest are a pattern. Regional, deliberate spacing. Someone was being careful. She was being careful. Marcus looked at the side-by-side for a long time without speaking. This wasn't a moment of weakness. The thought settled in him without anger, which surprised him slightly. What he felt wasn't rage. It was the particular cold clarity that came from looking at a structure you'd trusted with your full weight and realizing that it had never been what it appeared to be. "Can you put this into a certified report?" he said, "something that could be used in a legal proceeding." "That's standard," Terrence said. "Signed, notarized, methodology documented. I can have it to you by Thursday." "Do that," Marcus said. He looked up, and Terrence, "Keep digging on Garrett Solis, whatever financial footprint you can find from public records." Terrence made a note at the top of the page. The shop of his own particular patients. He drove home in the early dark, the Charlotte skyline sitting low and orange behind him. He didn't turn on the radio. He thought about the deck in the backyard. He thought about the level he kept in the garage, the 4-foot one with the vial of green fluid at its center. He thought about what it meant to build something true and then discover that someone had been quietly dismantling the foundation while you weren't looking. He went to the garage when he got home. He didn't work. He just stood at the bench with the shop light on until the tightness in his chest settled into something he could carry. There were things in this world that couldn't be recalculated into something better than what they were. An engineer learned that, or he spent his career building things that fell. He called his Aunt Celestine that night at 9 o'clock. She was his mother's older sister, 71 years old, retired from the county school system after 34 years, and possessed of the particular authority that came from having seen everything twice. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, baby." Her voice was the same as it had always been. Steady, warm, not given to fuss. He told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which was the family way. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then she said, "Your grandmother used to say that a man who builds with his hands knows the difference between what's solid and what only looks like it. You built that house, Marcus. You built your business. You'll build what comes next. Don't let this woman make you forget what kind of man you are." He sat with that for a moment. She told him something else, too. Something that landed harder. She'd seen it, she said. Not the affair, not specifically, but something. A phone call she'd overheard at Renee's birthday dinner 2 summers ago. A name mentioned that wasn't familiar. A laugh that Celestine had filed away in the quiet category of things she hoped she was wrong about. "I didn't want to be the woman who caused trouble for nothing," she said. "I'm sorry, baby. You weren't wrong to wait," he told her. Neither was I. He sat in the truck in the driveway for a while after he hung up, the engine off, the neighborhood dark and quiet around him. The porch light was on. The rosemary bush Renee had planted by the front steps had gone a little wild from the October rain. He went inside, went to the office, and started building the file. He named it simply Ellison. He worked until midnight pulling together everything Terrence had sent. The villa confirmation, the transaction log, the side-by-side comparison. Public records he'd found on Garrett Solis, including a LinkedIn note that placed him at a hospitality industry conference in Raleigh the same weekend Renee had attended what she'd called a spa retreat, 16 months ago. He printed Terrence's preliminary findings, tabbed the key pages, put everything in a manila envelope he left on the corner of his desk. Then he opened a second tab and looked at flight options to Scottsdale. He smiled, just slightly, at himself. He wasn't flying commercial. This was the part nobody at the Carver Group knew. This was the part Renee had never understood. Because Marcus had never explained it. Because it had never come up. Because she had never asked what he did on the weekends he said he was at a professional development seminar in Statesville. Marcus Ellison had a pilot's license, had held one for 11 years. And 3 years ago, working quietly with a business partner named Owen Park, he had bought into a fractional ownership arrangement on a Citation CJ-3 light jet through a charter operation called Ridgeline Air that operated out of Douglas International. He held a 22% stake. On weekends when the aircraft wasn't chartered, he flew it himself, logging hours, keeping current, because flying required the same thing structural engineering required. You either maintained your precision or you accepted that something would eventually fail. He had never told Renee about Ridgeline. Not from deception. From privacy. She had never shown much interest in what he did on his own, and he had learned early in the marriage not to offer what wasn't asked for. Over the years, the quiet ownership had become one of the few things that was entirely his. He hadn't thought much about what that said. He was thinking about it now. He called Owen that night. Owen picked up on the first ring, which meant he'd been expecting it. Owen was good at expecting things. Retired Air Force, now ran the charter side of Ridgeline with the particular efficiency of a man who had spent 20 years being responsible for things that could not afford to be wrong. "You need the airplane," Owen said. Friday morning, Scottsdale Executive. "Weather's clear. I'll file the flight plan. You want company?" "No, just the airplane." "Done," Owen said. "And Marcus, whatever it is, handle it clean." He always did. Friday arrived the way consequential days always did, the same as any other morning until it wasn't. Marcus was wheels up at 9:40 from Douglas International. The Citation climbed out over the Carolina Piedmont in clear autumn air, the city falling away below him in its grid of rooftops and highway interchange. He leveled off at flight level 350 and trimmed for cruise. Outside the cockpit, the sky was the deep, uncomplicated blue that only exists above the weather. He flew without the autopilot for the first hour. He needed his hands on something he trusted. He thought about Renee. He let himself feel the full weight of what it was. 9 years. The house, the savings, the version of a future they'd talked about over kitchen tables and late nights and long drives. He let it be as heavy as it actually was. He didn't look for a way to make it lighter. Then he set the autopilot, folded the feeling somewhere quiet and deliberate, and flew the rest of the way to Scottsdale. Scottsdale Executive Airport was small and unhurried, the way private facilities tend to be. No crowds, no announcements, just efficient ground handlers and a courtesy car waiting when he taxied to the FBO. He parked the Citation himself, ran the shutdown checklist with the same patience he gave everything, and sat in the quiet of the cockpit for a moment after the last engine wound down. He gathered the manila envelope from the seat beside him. He got out. The Arizona heat was different from Carolina heat, drier, sharper. The kind that pressed against the skin instead of soaking into it. The sky was enormous out here. The mountains sat at the edge of the valley in layers of brown and purple that didn't change no matter how many times you looked. Marcus had always liked this landscape. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. He had the address. He'd found it on the villa confirmation, which had included a PDF with the property location, the access code, and a map of the grounds. He put it into the rental car's navigation and drove west through the resort corridor, past hotels with elaborate water features and golf courses that looked like they'd been argued into existence against the desert's better judgment. The villa complex was tucked behind a low stucco wall, lush with planted desert landscaping, saguaro and palo verde, and bougainvillea spilling brilliant orange over the entry arch. A gatehouse attendant waved him through when he gave the villa number. No questions asked. He pulled into the guest lot and sat for a moment. He looked at his watch. 2:47 in the afternoon. The villa's schedule, as detailed in the welcome PDF he'd found attached to the confirmation, included a couple's massage booked for 2 o'clock. The dinner reservation was at 7. He'd landed between the two. He got out and walked to the villa entrance with the unhurried certainty of a man who had flight planned this leg of the journey and found no deviations from the forecast. The private courtyard was walled on 3 sides, with a gate that used a keypad code. He had the code from the PDF. He entered it. The gate opened. The pool was visible first, turquoise in the afternoon light, the kind of still that meant no one was in it. Patio furniture arranged just so, a half-empty bottle of water on the table near the chaise lounges. 2 towels folded at the end of the pool deck, the resort kind, thick and white. The sliding glass door to the villa's living area was closed, but not locked. He knocked. Then he opened the door and stepped in. Renee came out of the hallway in a white resort robe, her hair damp, a phone in her hand, and she stopped so completely that for a moment she appeared to have become part of the architecture. "Marcus," she said. It was barely a word. Garrett Solis appeared in the doorway behind her a second later. He was taller in person, older-looking than the LinkedIn photo suggested, his shirt half-buttoned, a towel across one shoulder. He looked at Marcus with the expression of a man running rapid calculations about all the possible versions of what this moment could become. Marcus looked at him once. Then he looked at Renee. He crossed to the table by the window and set the manila envelope down on it. Flat, square, unhurried. "I'm not going to make a scene," he said. His voice was low and even. "You know I'm not that kind of man." He looked at Renee. "You've always known that. I think that might have been part of the problem." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out that could be called words. He opened the envelope and placed the first document on the table. Terrence's forensic report, cover page visible, his name and license number at the top, 8 pages paper clipped beneath. $47,360, Marcus said. Over 19 months. Terrence documented every transfer, every account, the methodology he used, and his professional opinion. It's signed and notarized. He looked up at her. That number doesn't include the villa. Her face had changed. The color had left it in a way that reminded him of a soil report reading that comes back wrong. That particular moment when a number stops being abstract and becomes a fact you have to build around. He placed the second document beside it. The side-by-side comparison, transfers against travel dates. 31 alignments highlighted in yellow. "Denise Okafor is my attorney," he said. "The filing is already in." He said it the way he announced load calculations, not as a threat, as a fact the room now had to accommodate. "The paperwork in that envelope is already copied to her office." Renee's robe pulled tight where she had grabbed it at the collar without realizing it. "You flew here," she said finally. Her voice was strange. "Thin, you flew here yourself." He looked at her. He let the silence hold for a moment. "She had no idea," he said quietly, not said to her. Said to the air between them, the same way he sometimes spoke the final answer of a calculation aloud, just to hear it confirmed. She had no idea who she'd been married to. 9 years, and she thought she knew the shape of him. He felt something close to sadness about that. Not grief for her. Grief for how thoroughly she had underestimated what was right in front of her. Garrett Solis had not moved. He was still standing in the doorway with a towel on his shoulder and the expression of a man trying to decide whether he was a participant or a piece of furniture. Marcus did not look at him again. Garrett Solis was not his concern. "Renee," he said, "sign the settlement as written. Denise sent the terms to your attorney last week. The house, the joint assets as documented. You walk away, and Terrence's report stays in a folder." He paused. He held her eyes, and what he felt looking at her was not anger. Had not been anger once through any of this, which he thought said something true about them both. Fight it, and everything Terrence documented goes to a fraud examiner. That's not a threat. That's just what the process requires. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the documents on the table. Then she looked away. Whatever she had planned to say in some imagined version of this conversation, the denial, the explanation, the reframe, none of it was available to her now. He could see her searching for an angle and finding that the room had none. "I need to think," she said. "The settlement terms are already fair," Marcus said. He picked up the envelope and left the 2 remaining copies on the table. He straightened his jacket. He looked at her one final time. 9 years, Renee. I never stopped paying attention. You just stopped noticing that I was." He turned and walked out through the courtyard, through the gate, and back to the rental car. The drive back to Scottsdale Executive was 17 minutes. He drove with the windows down, the desert air moving through the car, the saguaros standing along the roadside in the early evening light like they had always been there, and always would be. The sky had gone amber at the edges. The mountains were going dark at their ridgelines. He filed the return flight plan, did the pre-flight on the Citation with the same methodical care he always did. Fuel, control surfaces, avionics, squawk code, and taxied to the runway without hurry. He was wheels up before sunset. He climbed out to the east, the valley lights beginning to come on below him as the sky darkened, Scottsdale falling away in its grid of warm amber and white. He leveled off and trimmed for cruise and flew toward the dark half of the horizon where the Carolinas were waiting. He did not think about what was happening in the villa behind him. He thought about the deck in the backyard. He thought about the level he would use come spring to check it. He thought about Owen's voice on the phone the night before. Handle it clean. He had. The signed settlement agreement arrived 11 days later. Renee's attorney sent it over in a single email with no cover note, which told Marcus everything about how the conversation had gone on her end. He reviewed it line by line with Denise, and everything was exactly as written. Clean, fast, no amendments. He signed his name in his usual steady hand. She looked them over once more, stacked them, and said, "That's done." He nodded. He picked up his jacket and walked out into a November morning that had that particular clarity that settles over Charlotte after a cold front moves through. Terrence had followed up on Garrett Solis's trail in the public record. Solis's company had 2 hotel properties under development in the Charlotte metro, both under a financing arrangement that a regional lender's compliance team had recently begun reviewing after irregularities appeared in the draw requests. Not Marcus's doing, just a structure that had already been hollow, waiting for its own weight to find it. By winter, Renee had let her studio lease lapse. She'd moved out of Charlotte, relocated somewhere in the upstate. Her social media had gone quiet. Marcus noticed this the same way he noticed any data point, briefly, without attachment, and filed it away. Garrett Solis's name disappeared from the hospitality group's website 2 months after Scottsdale. A colleague mentioned it in passing. Marcus said nothing. He moved on to the next conversation. Ridgeline Air expanded that year. Owen brought him in on a corporate charter contract out of Raleigh and an air ambulance partnership with a regional hospital network. The equity stake had done what well-managed equity stakes do. Marcus had built it the same way he built everything, carefully, without announcing it to anyone who hadn't asked. By the following spring, he'd added 12 square feet to the back deck. He framed it out over a long March weekend, alone with his tools and the radio, checking the level every few feet as he went. The bubble sat in the center every time. He was standing on the new section on a Sunday afternoon in April, coffee in hand, when his phone buzzed. Asha Drummond, a structural engineer at a firm across town he'd collaborated with on a bridge project the previous fall. She was asking if he wanted to walk the Greenway later. She was breaking in new trail shoes and wanted a second opinion. He read the message twice. He felt something loosen in him that he hadn't realized was still held tight. He wrote back, "I know that trail. Give me 45 minutes. He set the coffee on the railing. He looked at the deck. Level, solid, entirely his. The maple at the back edge of the yard was just coming into leaf, that tentative early spring green that only lasted about a week before the world got certain of itself again. There were things that couldn't be repaired. A man who spent his career understanding load paths and failure modes knew this without being told. Not everything could be salvaged. Some things had to come out entirely before you could build what should have been there from the beginning. He had built right. He always had. A structure built true didn't need you to keep checking it. It held because of what you put into it, and nothing else. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.